Rain hammered Chicago like 1,000 fists. Neon lights bled into the wet asphalt, turning the city into a watercolor painting run wild. Inside a matte black Bentley flying spur, Paul Caldwell gripped the wheel so hard his knuckles went white. 43 years old, white, blonde hair now plastered to his forehead. The man who owned half the skyscrapers downtown was coming undone. The phone call still rang in his ears. Mr. Caldwell, I'm truly sorry. The final tests are conclusive. You are completely infertile. There is no viable sperm. There never will be. Infertile. The word tasted like poison. All his life he had been told the Caldwell name had to continue. His father's voice, cold and cutting, echoed from childhood boardrooms. Empires are nothing if the bloodline dies. Paul. Now the bloodline ended with him. He punched the accelerator. The Bentley roared, hydroplaning through sheets of water. He didn't see the red light, didn't hear the horns. All he saw was blackness closing in. Across town, Amara Johnson eased her rattling 2008 Honda Civic through the storm. 35. African American. Natural curls tied high. Eyes sharp, even when exhausted. She had just finished a 12-hour day teaching literature at Southside High and running the after-school program at the community center her mother never lived to open. Her hand rested instinctively on her still flat stomach. 2 pink lines had appeared on the test 3 weeks ago. Twins. The father, Marcus Reed, had taken one look at the ultrasound photo, muttered, "I ain't ready for this," and vanished. She hadn't heard from him since. Amara didn't cry anymore. She had bills, kids who needed her, and a promise to her late mother to keep. Tears were a luxury she couldn't afford. Lightning cracked the sky. Up ahead, on the bridge, a black luxury car spun wildly, slammed the guardrail, flipped once, twice, and came to rest on its roof. Flames licked from the engine. Amara's foot hit the brake before her brain caught up. She threw the Honda into park, kicked off her wet sneakers to be, and ran. The heat hit her first angry, hungry fire. Gasoline stench burned her throat. She dropped to her knees, reached through the shattered driver window, and found a man's wrist. Pulse weak. But there. Come on. Come on. She braced her feet against the twisted doorframe, grabbed under his arms, and pulled. The man was heavy 6'2", maybe 200 pounds, but adrenaline turned her into someone else. Metal screamed. Sparks showered. She dragged him inch by inch across broken glass and rainwater until they collapsed together, 10 feet from the wreck. Boom! The Bentley exploded into an orange fireball that lit the bridge like daylight. Amara rolled onto her back, coughing, soaked, every muscle shaking. The man beside her groaned. Blood ran from a cut above his eyebrow, mixing with the rain. His eyes fluttered open, startling ocean blue against smoke-smudged skin, and fixed on her. For one endless second, the storm disappeared. There was only the sound of their breathing and the crackle of fire. "You okay?" he rasped. Amara laughed once, a raw, incredulous sound. "I was about to ask you the same thing." Sirens wailed closer. Red and blue lights painted the bridge. Firefighters shouted. Paramedics swarmed. "What's your name, a firefighter?" yelled over the noise. Amara looked down at the stranger one last time. His hand had found hers in the chaos and hadn't let go. "It doesn't matter," she said softly. "Just take care of him." She slipped away before anyone could stop her, climbed back into the dented Honda, and drove off into the night, hair dripping, heart racing. No idea that she had just pulled Paul Caldwell, one of the richest men in America, out of the jaws of death, and no idea that the two tiny lives growing inside her were about to tie their fates together forever. In the hospital, Paul woke to antiseptic smells and harsh fluorescent light. Monitors beeped. His head throbbed. But he was alive. A nurse adjusted his IV. "You're incredibly lucky, Mr. Caldwell. A woman dragged you out seconds before the car exploded. She disappeared before we could get her name." Paul stared at the ceiling. He could still feel the warmth of her hands, hear her steady voice cutting through the roar of flames. "I've got you. Find her," he told his assistant, Olivia Bennett, the moment she stepped into the room. Red hair pulled tight, tablet already glowing with work. "I don't care what it costs. Find the woman who saved me." Olivia raised an eyebrow, but knew better than to argue. Already started. "Boss." 2 days later, she returned with a thin folder and a single photograph. "Amara Johnson," Olivia said, placing the picture on his tray table. 35. Literature teacher at Southside High. Runs a community center for at-risk teens. Grew up in Englewood. No record, no debt. Scholarship kid from Northwestern. And she hesitated. She's pregnant. Twins. Father not in the picture. Paul picked up the photo. Amara stood surrounded by laughing teenagers. Arms open wide. Smile bright enough to power the city. Something fierce and unfamiliar tightened in his chest. "She didn't just save my life," he said quietly. "She gave me back a reason to live on the same night I thought I'd lost everything." Olivia watched him carefully. "What do you want to do?" He didn't take his eyes off the picture. "I want to meet her, in person, and I want to thank her properly." Far across the city, in a tiny third-floor apartment lined with books, Amara sat on her couch rubbing cocoa butter over her belly. The local news played softly in the background footage of a fiery wreck on the bridge. A billionaire pulled from the flames by a mystery heroine. She muted the TV and closed her eyes. "Whoever you are," she thought, "I hope you're okay." She had no idea that the man whose life she saved was already moving heaven and earth to step into hers, and that destiny had already written both their names on the birth certificates of the two little girls kicking gently beneath her ribs. Paul Caldwell was not a man who waited. 48 hours after Olivia handed him Amara's file, he was discharged. Stitches itching above his eyebrow. Determination burning hotter than any painkiller. He stood in front of his penthouse window overlooking Lake Michigan and dialed Olivia again. "Set the meeting." "Already did," she replied smoothly. "Mama's kitchen on 79th. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. I told her assistant it was the man from the accident who wanted to say thank you. She agreed, but only if it's public and short. Paul exhaled. Perfect. He spent the rest of the day restless. Tailors delivered new suits. He waved them away. He tried to work. Numbers blurred. All he could see was the photograph of Amara Johnson surrounded by children who looked at her like she hung the moon. The next evening, Mama's kitchen smelled of fried catfish and cornbread. Ceiling fans spun lazily. Old men played chess in the corner. Paul arrived 20 minutes early, wearing a simple navy sweater and jeans, an outfit that probably still cost more than the diner made in a week. He took the corner booth, ordered sweet tea he didn't drink, and waited. At 7:03, the bell above the door chimed. Amara stepped inside, raindrops still clinging to her curls. She wore a deep green dress that hugged the first gentle curve of pregnancy. simple gold hoops in her ears. She spotted him immediately. He was impossible to miss. Even dressed down and walked over with the calm stride of someone who had long ago decided fear would not own her. Mr. Caldwell. Her voice was warm, low, the kind that made teenagers actually listen in class. Paul, he corrected, standing too fast and nearly knocking over the tea. Please. She slid into the booth opposite him, up close. Her eyes were darker than in the photograph, flecked with gold, and they studied him without apology. You're the man from the car, she said, not a question. He nodded. And you're the woman who dragged me out of a burning Bentley like I weighed nothing. A small smile tugged at her mouth. Adrenaline. And you were mostly dead weight. Silence settled, not awkward exactly, but heavy with everything unsaid. Paul cleared his throat. I don't even know where to start. Thank you seems too small. It's enough, Amara said gently. I'm just glad you're alive. The waitress brought cornbread. Amara's smile widened. She knew the woman, and suddenly the air felt easier. They talked about small things, the storm, the diner's famous peach cobbler, how she'd slipped on the wet pavement twice running to his car. Then Paul asked, Why did you stop? Most people wouldn't have. Amara shrugged, breaking a piece of cornbread. My mama always said if you see someone drowning and you've got a rope, you throw it. Doesn't matter who they are. He wanted to ask about her mother, about the community center, about the twins' god, the twins, but he sensed the wall she kept politely in place. Instead, he said, I'd like to do something for you. Anything. Her eyes flickered. I don't want money. I know. He leaned forward. But you run that center alone. Let me help. Quietly. No strings. Amara studied him for a long moment. I'll think about it. Outside the window, a shadow moved. Marcus Reed leaned against a street lamp across the road, hood up, watching through the glass. He'd followed Amara after seeing the news clip of the mystery heroine. A slow grin spread across his face, a billionaire sniffing around his baby mama jackpot. Inside, Paul paid the bill before Amara could protest. As they stepped onto the sidewalk, camera flashes suddenly exploded. Paul Caldwell, with his new girlfriend. Is she the hero who saved him? Miss, are you pregnant with his baby? Amara froze. Paul instinctively moved in front of her, arm out like a shield. I'm sorry, he said under his breath. This is my fault. She looked up at him, eyes wide but steady. I can handle reporters. I just don't want my kids' lives starting in tabloids. Before he could answer, she slipped past the photographers and into the rain. Paul watched her go, heart hammering harder than it had the night his car exploded. Marcus melted back into the darkness, already texting a contact. Got something better than child support. Way better. The next morning, Chicago woke to screaming headlines. Billionaire's mystery heroine. Pregnant teacher from the South Side, is this love or a gold digger's dream? Amara stared at her phone in the teacher's lounge, stomach twisting. One of the photos showed Paul reaching for her hand as they left the diner. The caption read, Caldwell caught in tender moment. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. We need to talk again. Same place. Tonight. Please. Paul. She typed back before she could overthink it. 8 Palm. And this time, no cameras. Across town, Paul stood in his office. Blinds open to the gray lake. Olivia placed a stack of newspapers on his desk. Your sister's already called 3 times, she said dryly. Victoria is not pleased. Paul didn't look up. Tell Victoria I'm busy building a family. Olivia's eyebrows shot up, but she said nothing. That night, Mama's kitchen was closed to the public. Paul had quietly paid for the privilege. Only the cook remained in the back, humming gospel. Amara arrived first, arms crossed, expression guarded. Paul walked in 5 minutes later, hair damp from the drizzle, looking like a man who hadn't slept. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I should have anticipated the photographers. It's not your fault the world is obsessed with you." She sighed. "But my students saw those headlines. Parents are calling the principal. I can't have my life turned into a circus." "I can fix that," Paul said. "I can make them disappear. All of them." She shook her head. "I don't want them silenced. I want them to print the truth, that I pulled a stranger out of a fire. That's it." He stepped closer. "Then let me stand next to you when they do. Let me tell them who you really are." Amara met his gaze, and for the first time the wall wavered. "Why does it matter so much to you?" "Because the night I lost everything," he said quietly, "you gave me hope I didn't deserve, and I'm not letting go of that." Silence stretched between them, thick with possibility and fear. Then Amara's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Tell your rich boyfriend the twins aren't his to buy. I want what's mine. M." Her face went pale. Paul saw. "What is it?" She showed him the message. His jaw hardened. "The father." She nodded once. Paul's voice dropped to something dangerous. "He doesn't get to threaten you. Not ever again." Outside. Thunder rolled. Inside Mama's kitchen. Two worlds that should never have touched now stood inches apart, and the storm was only beginning. The text from Marcus hung in the air like smoke. "Tell your rich boyfriend the twins aren't his to buy. I want what's mine. M." Amara's hand trembled as she locked the phone. The warmth of Mama's kitchen suddenly felt suffocating. Paul's voice was low, controlled fury. "How much does he want?" "He didn't say money." She swallowed. "He just disappeared when I told him I was keeping them. I thought he was gone for good." Paul pulled out his own phone, already dialing. "Olivia, I need everything you can find on a Marcus Reed. Prior addresses, debts, arrests, known associates. Now." He ended the call and looked at Amara. "He's not coming near you or the babies. I promise you that." Amara gave a short, humorless laugh. "You can't promise something like that, Paul. You don't even know him." "I know men like him," he said, "and I know what I'm willing to do to protect you." The words hung between them too heavy, too soon. Amara took a step back. "I'm not a charity case. I never said you were." He softened. "But you don't have to fight every battle alone anymore." She wanted to argue, but the exhaustion of the last few weeks of the pregnancy, the headlines, the whispers at school pressed down on her shoulders. She closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, Paul was watching her with something that looked dangerously close to awe. "Come home with me tonight," he said quietly. "Just tonight. My building has security. No reporters. No Marcus. You can sleep without looking over your shoulder." Amara hesitated. Every instinct told her to say no, to keep the walls high. But the memory of that threatening text crawled across her skin like ice. "One night," she said finally, "and I'm taking the guest room." Paul's penthouse took up the entire 66th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the glittering city and the dark expanse of Lake Michigan. Everything was sleek white marble, pale wood, touches of steel, but it didn't feel cold. Books lined one wall. A grand piano sat untouched in the corner. It smelled faintly of cedar and coffee. Paul gave her the tour in silence, then handed her a stack of brand new sweats and a t-shirt still in their tags. "I had Olivia pick these up. Figured you wouldn't want to sleep in that dress. Amara disappeared into the guest suite, larger than her entire apartment, and emerged 20 minutes later, hair wrapped in a silk scarf, drowning in his clothes. Paul was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, attempting to make tea. He looked up and forgot what he was doing. "You look..." He cleared his throat. "Tea's almost ready." They sat on the wide sectional, city lights painting soft patterns across the room. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Amara said, "This is insane. 2 weeks ago, I didn't know your name. Now I'm in your penthouse drinking chamomile like we're old friends." Paul set his mug down. "I keep replaying that night. The fire. Your hands pulling me out. I've never felt so helpless. And then you were there. Like some kind of miracle I didn't deserve." Amara looked at him over the rim of her cup. "You keep saying that you don't deserve it. Why?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Because I've spent my whole life believing everything has a price," he said at last. "Deals, favors, relationships, everything. And then you risked your life for a stranger and asked for nothing. It doesn't compute." Amara felt something shift inside her chest. Maybe it's not about computing. Maybe it's just about being human. Paul's gaze dropped to her stomach, still barely rounded, and something raw flickered across his face. "I found out I can't have children the same day you saved me," he said, voice rough. "The universe has a sick sense of humor." Amara's breath caught. She set her tea down and reached for his hand without thinking. "I'm sorry." He turned his palm up, closing his fingers around hers. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me. I just needed you to know." They stayed like that, hands linked, city humming far below until Amara's eyes grew heavy. Paul walked her to the guest room, paused at the door. "If you need anything, water, another blanket, someone to yell at my rooms at the end of the hall." She managed a tired smile. "Good night, Paul." "Good night, Amara." She closed the door, leaned against it, and let out a shaky breath. For the first time in weeks, she slept without nightmares. The next morning, Olivia arrived with breakfast and a tablet full of bad news. "Marcus Reed," she said without preamble, sliding into a chair at the island. "Gambling debts up to his eyeballs. 2 domestic violence complaints, both dropped when the women suddenly moved out of state. Last known address is a motel on the west side. And he's been asking questions about you, boss. A lot of questions." Paul's jaw tightened. "Get security on Amara's apartment, the community center, her school, 24/7. Amara walked in wearing the same borrowed clothes, hair in a fresh puff. "I heard that. I don't need bodyguards." "You do if he's dangerous," Paul said. "I've handled dangerous before." She lifted her chin. "I'm not hiding." "Then we don't hide," Paul said. "We face it together." Olivia watched the exchange with carefully masked curiosity, then cleared her throat. "There's one more thing. Victoria Caldwell is on her way up. Elevator's already moving." Paul cursed under his breath. 30 seconds later, the private elevator opened, and Victoria Caldwell strode in blonde hair in a severe knot. Navy suit sharp enough to cut glass. Her gaze swept the room, landed on Amara, and turned arctic. "Paul, a word." He didn't move. "Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Amara." Victoria's smile was thin. "Very well. I came to deliver a message personally." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a slim leather folder. Inside was a check for $2 million made out to Amara Johnson. "Take it," Victoria said coolly. "Disappear. My brother has a reputation to protect. And you, Miss Johnson, are becoming a liability. The room went deadly quiet. Amara stared at the check, then at Victoria. When she spoke, her voice was soft steel. Lady, I grew up sharing one bathroom with 12 people. I buried my mama at 12. I've been called every name you can print, and some you can't. $2 million doesn't scare me, and it sure as hell doesn't buy me. She picked up the check, tore it neatly in half, then in half again, and let the pieces flutter to the marble floor. Victoria's composure cracked for the first time. You have no idea who you're... Get out, Paul said, voice like a blade. Now. Victoria opened her mouth, thought better of it, and left without another word. The elevator doors closed. Amara's hands were shaking. Paul crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. She resisted for half a second, then buried her face in his chest. I'm sorry, he murmured into her hair. She had no right. Amara laughed once, shaky, incredulous. Your sister just offered me $2 million to vanish, and you're apologizing. I'll cut her out of everything if she ever comes near you again. Amara pulled back, searching his face. Don't. Family's complicated. I know that better than anyone. She took a breath. But I meant what I said. I'm not for sale. I know, he whispered. That's why He stopped himself. Why you what? He brushed a curl from her forehead. Why I'm falling for you so hard? It scares the hell out of me. The words hung between them, impossible to take back. Amara's heart pounded against her ribs. She should step away. She should say this was too fast, too crazy. Instead, she rose on her toes and kissed him soft, tentative, tasting chamomile and fear and hope. Paul froze, then kissed her back like a man who'd been starving for years. His hands slid to her waist, careful of the small life growing there. When they finally broke apart, foreheads still touching, both were breathing hard. This is insane, she whispered. Yeah, he said against her lips, but it's ours. Outside the windows, Chicago woke up to another gray morning, oblivious to the fact that 2 lives had just collided and changed forever. For 10 days, the penthouse became a strange, beautiful bubble. Amara kept teaching. Paul insisted on driving her himself, waiting in the parking lot like an overprotective boyfriend until she threatened to take the bus just to watch him squirm. Evenings were spent cooking together badly, arguing over baby names, and falling asleep on the couch to old movies. Marcus stayed quiet, too quiet. Olivia's daily updates grew darker, unpaid loan sharks circling. Whispers that Marcus was trying to sell a story about the billionaire who stole my babies. Paul, tripled security. Amara pretended not to notice the new faces outside the community center. Then came the night everything cracked open. They were in the kitchen, Amara laughing because Paul had somehow turned pasta sauce into charcoal, when her phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. A video file. She opened it. Grainy footage, clearly taken from a distance. Amara and Paul in the living room window 2 nights ago, kissing, his hand resting protectively on her stomach. The text beneath read, "Pretty picture. Shame if something happened to it. Or to them. $5 million by Friday. Instructions to follow. Tell the police and the next video goes to every news station with your address attached." Amara's knees buckled. Paul caught her, read the message, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. He's bluffing, Paul said, but his voice shook with rage. He knows where we are, Amara whispered. He's watching. Paul made 3 calls in rapid succession. Olivia, his head of security, and a private investigator who owed him favors that could never be repaid. Within an hour, the penthouse was crawling with people, tech specialists sweeping for cameras, bodyguards posted on every entrance. Amara sat on the couch, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the frozen image of them kissing. "I should go back to my apartment," she said suddenly. "If I leave, he'll follow me. You'll be safe." Paul knelt in front of her, taking her cold hands. "Listen to me. You are not bait. You are not a bargaining chip. You are the woman I love. And those babies are my family now, whether blood says so or not. We face this together." She searched his eyes. "You love me. I've been in love with you since the night you dragged me out of fire and looked at me like I was worth saving." Tears slipped down her cheeks. He brushed them away with his thumbs. "We're going to catch him," he said fiercely. "And then we're going to build the life he's trying to destroy. But right now, I need you to trust me." She nodded, barely a movement. That night, they didn't sleep. Paul worked the phones while Amara sat at the piano, picking out the lullaby her mother used to hum. The notes filled the quiet, fragile and brave. At 3:17 a.m., Olivia called back. "We found him. Motel off Cicero. He's holed up with two guys who make their living breaking knees. They're waiting for the money drop instructions." Paul's voice was ice. "Set it up, but we're not paying." Instead, they built a trap. Friday dawned cold and bright. Paul kissed Amara goodbye at the door, both of them pretending this was a normal day. She went to the community center under heavy guard. He went to a warehouse in an industrial corner of the city, carrying a silver briefcase everyone believed held $5 million in unmarked bills. Marcus waited inside, flanked by two men built like refrigerators. He looked thinner, eyes bloodshot, but the smirk was the same. "Money first," Marcus said. Paul set the case on a crate. "Open it." Marcus flipped the latches. Inside stacks of paper cut to size. A single envelope on top. He tore it open. A single photograph, Marcus signing away parental rights in exchange for a previous debt forgiveness, dated 6 months ago, before he even knew Amara was pregnant, forged perfectly by Olivia's contacts, but convincing enough. Marcus went white. "This is fake." "Doesn't matter," Paul said. Red dots appeared on Marcus's chest and the foreheads of his muscle laser sights from snipers on the catwalks. "You threatened a pregnant woman and tried to extort me. You're done." Marcus lunged for the briefcase anyway. The lights cut out. When they flared back on 30 seconds later, Marcus was zip-tied on the floor. His partners, already gone, paid more to disappear than to stay loyal. Paul crouched beside him. "You will never speak her name again. You will never come within 100 miles of her or those babies. If you do, they'll never find all the pieces. Do we understand each other?" Marcus spat blood but nodded. By noon, it was over. Police took Marcus into custody on outstanding warrants the PI had helpfully unearthed. The loan sharks, suddenly unpaid and facing their own heat, vanished him from their books. Paul drove straight to the community center. Amara was in the backyard, supervising teenagers painting a mural. She took one look at his face and knew. "It's finished," she asked. "It's finished." She walked into his arms, right there, in front of 20 kids and 3 teachers, buried her face in his neck, and cried not from fear this time, but from relief so deep it felt like flying. That night, back in the penthouse, Paul poured 2 glasses of sparkling cider and led her to the living room window. The city sparkled below them like scattered diamonds. "I have one more thing," he said, voice rough. He dropped to one knee. Amara's breath caught. "I don't have a ring yet," he said, smiling crookedly. "I was afraid I'd jinx everything if I bought one too soon, but I don't want to wait anymore. Marry me, Amara. Let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of the woman who saved me body and soul. She stared at him, tears already falling. Say yes, he whispered. Please. She laughed through the tears, pulled him up, and kissed him until they were both breathless. Yes, she said against his mouth. 1,000 times yes. Far below, the city kept moving, unaware that high above the streets, two people who should never have met had just promised each other forever, and that the twins kicking happily in Amara's belly already had a father who would move mountains to keep them safe. But in the shadows of an alley across the street, a figure watched the lighted penthouse window through binoculars. Victoria Caldwell lowered them slowly, lips pressed into a thin line. She had lost round one. She didn't intend to lose the war. The proposal made the papers the next morning, but not the way anyone expected. A single photograph, taken from a rooftop with a telephoto lens, Paul on one knee in the penthouse window, Amara's hands covering her mouth in shock, city lights glittering behind them. The headline was brutal. Caldwell proposes to pregnant heroine, but sister vows to stop wedding at any cost. Victoria Caldwell had given an exclusive interview to the Chicago Tribune before dawn. My brother is not in his right mind. She was quoted. This woman appeared out of nowhere, saved his life, and now has him convinced he's in love. I will protect the Caldwell legacy with every resource at my disposal. By the time Paul saw it, he was already in the car on the way to Amara's community center. He read the article twice, knuckles white on the steering wheel. Amara met him at the door, phone in hand, face calm in the way that meant she was furious underneath. She called me a gold-digging opportunist who used a car wreck to trap you, Amara said quietly. My students saw it. Their parents saw it. One mother already pulled her son out of the after-school program. Paul's voice was lethal. I'm ending this today. He called Victoria from the center's tiny office, put it on speaker so Amara could hear. Retract it, he said the moment his sister picked up. All of it. Or I swear I will freeze every account you touch, sell your shares at a loss, and make sure the board removes you as co-chair by Monday. Victoria laughed, cold and sharp. You'd destroy the company for her. I'd burn the company to the ground before I let you hurt her again. Silence crackled across the line. You don't know what you're doing, Paul. There are things about her. Stop. His voice cracked like a whip. You have until 5 p.m. to issue a full public apology. After that, you're on your own. He hung up. Amara watched him, arms folded. You just declared war on your own sister. She declared it first. That afternoon, the community center's donation page crashed from traffic, some from supportive strangers, some from hate. Anonymous messages flooded Amara's email. Go back to the South Side. You don't belong with him. At 4:58 p.m., Victoria released a statement through the Caldwell Enterprises PR team. I spoke out of concern for my brother. My words were poorly chosen. I apologize to Miss Johnson and wish her and Paul every happiness. It was short, icy but funny, and clearly written by lawyers. Paul read it and threw his phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. Amara picked up the pieces without comment. That night they lay in bed, city lights painting stripes across the ceiling. I'm scared, she admitted into the dark. Not of Victoria, of what this will do to the babies. Stress isn't good. Paul rolled over, placed his hand gently on the small curve of her stomach. Then we take the stress away. Tomorrow we disappear for a week. Just us. No phones, no press, no family. Doctor said the lake house is safe for you to travel. Amara turned to face him. You'd really walk away from everything for 7 days. I'd walk away forever if you asked me to. She kissed him, then slow, deep, grateful. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "Lake House sounds perfect." They left at dawn the next morning in an unmarked SUV, security following at a distance. The Caldwell family lake house sat on 400 private acres in Wisconsin cedar and stone, floor-to-ceiling windows looking over water so still it mirrored the sky. For 6 days, they lived like normal people. Paul burned pancakes. Amara read poetry aloud on the dock while dragonflies hovered. They made love in the afternoon sun and talked about names. Zoe and Maya were already decided, but middle names were still up for debate. On the 5th night, they sat on the porch swing, wrapped in one blanket, watching heat lightning flicker on the horizon. Amara rested her head on his shoulder. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop." Paul kissed her temple. "No shoes here, just us." But the shoe was already falling. Back in Chicago, Victoria had not been idle. She'd hired a private investigation firm known for discretion and ruthlessness. Late on the 6th night, an encrypted email landed in her inbox titled, "Amara Johnson, full background." She opened it in her darkened office, glass of scotch untouched. Page after page of Amara's life, childhood in Englewood, mother's death, scholarship to Northwestern, the community center, medical records confirming the twins, and then the final page. A single line, bolded. Paternity probability re, Paul Caldwell and fetuses 99.998%. Victoria stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Paul wasn't just in love with the woman carrying another man's children. He was the father, and he didn't know. They came home on a Sunday evening, relaxed and sun-kissed, laughing over Paul's attempt to grill fish without setting the dock on fire. Security met them at the private elevator with faces that wiped the smiles away. "Miss Caldwell is waiting in the penthouse, sir," the lead guard said. "She threatened to call the police if we didn't let her up." Paul's hand tightened on Amara's. "Stay here." "No," Amara said firmly. "We do this together." They stepped out of the elevator into the living room. Victoria stood by the windows, backlit by the city, a manila folder in her hand. Her face was unreadable. "Leave us," Paul told security. The door shut with a soft click. Victoria didn't waste time. Congratulations on the engagement. Her voice could have frozen the lake they'd just left. And on the twins. "Yours, apparently." Paul froze. Amara felt the floor tilt. "What are you talking about?" Victoria tossed the folder onto the coffee table. It landed with a slap. DNA results. Fetal cells from Amara's last prenatal blood draw matched against Paul's medical profile. He's the father. Paul stared at the folder like it might bite him. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Victoria's smile was sharp. 3 years ago, you spent a month in Kenya under the name Elias Carter. Building clinics, saving the world. Ring any bells? Amara's knees buckled. She sat hard on the couch. Paul's face drained of color. There was a doctor. Local volunteer coordinator. We were careful. Apparently not careful enough. Victoria's gaze flicked to Amara. She didn't know either. Until now. Silence roared in the room. Amara found her voice first. Small and cracked. 3 years ago, I spent one night with a man named Elias. He left before sunrise. I never saw him again. She looked at Paul, eyes wide with dawning horror and wonder. You were Elias. Paul dropped to his knees in front of her, hands hovering like he was afraid to touch. I swear I didn't know. I would never. I know, she whispered. Tears spilled over. I know you didn't. Victoria watched them, something almost like satisfaction in her eyes. Now you understand why I fought this. The press will have a field day. The board will lose their minds. Our family. Shut up, Victoria. Paul's voice was raw. He didn't look away from Amara. Just shut up. He cupped Amara's face gently. Say something. Please. She laughed once, shocked, wet, disbelieving. We made 2 babies on another continent. And then I pulled you out of a burning car. And you still found me. She shook her head. The universe is showing off. Paul let out a broken sound and pulled her into his arms. She clung to him, both of them shaking. Victoria turned to leave. At the elevator, she paused. For what it's worth, she said quietly. I was wrong. About everything. The doors closed behind her. They stayed on the floor for a long time, foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air. Eventually, Paul whispered, Marry me tomorrow. Amara laughed through tears. You already asked. I'm asking again. City Hall, 10 a.m. I don't want to wait another day to make this official. She kissed him salt and relief and promise. Yes. The next morning they were married in a small room that smelled of floor wax and old paper. Olivia and Jamal, Amara's favorite student, stood witness. Amara wore a simple white dress that hid the growing curve of her belly. Paul wore the same navy sweater from their first dinner at Mama's kitchen. When the judge said, You may kiss the bride, Paul kissed her like the world was ending and beginning at once. Afterward, they walked out into spring sunshine hand in hand, legally husband and wife, parents to 2 miracles neither had planned. They had exactly 6 hours of peace. At 4:17 p.m., Paul's phone exploded with alerts. Breaking Caldwell. Secretly marries pregnant teacher, and the twins are his after all. Someone. Victoria's investigator. A nurse with a price. It didn't matter, had leaked everything. By nightfall, the story was global. Paul carried Amara over the threshold of the penthouse that now belonged to both of them, kicked the door shut against the flashing cameras below, and set her down gently. Let them talk, he said against her lips. We know the truth. She smiled, fingers threading through his hair. Take me to bed, Mr. Caldwell. He did. Much later, tangled in sheets and moonlight, Amara traced the scar above his eyebrow, the one from the night she saved him. We're going to be okay, she whispered. Paul kissed her palm. Better than okay. We're going to be legendary. Outside, Chicago kept spinning cameras, headlines, gossip, envy. Inside, 2 people who had circled the world and crashed into each other twice, held on tight, listening to the quiet, fierce heartbeat of the family they had made against all odds. And in the darkness of her temporary prison cell, because Victoria had quietly turned over evidence of the investigators' illegal methods, Victoria Caldwell poured herself a drink and allowed the smallest, most reluctant smile. Maybe, she thought, some legacies were meant to be broken and rebuilt stronger. The storm had passed. The real story was just beginning. For the first time in either of their lives, the days felt gentle. Summer settled over Chicago like a soft blanket. The penthouse windows stayed open, letting in lake breezes and the distant sound of sailboats. Paul learned how to install baby-proof locks and swore creatively every time he pinched a finger. Amara laughed until tears came, then kissed the injured fingers better. They turned the second guest room into a nursery, pale gray walls, bookshelves already overflowing, 2 white cribs facing each other like mirror images. On the wall above them, Amara painted a single line in her mother's handwriting. You are my sun, my moon, and all my stars. Paul watched her from the doorway one afternoon, paint on her cheek, belly round and proud beneath an old t-shirt of his. He crossed the room without a word. wrapped his arms around her from behind, and rested his chin on her shoulder. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up," he murmured. Amara set the brush down and turned in his arms. "If this is a dream, we're both late for the alarm." He kissed her, slow and reverent, hands cradling the curve where their daughters grew. The press had finally grown bored. Victoria had gone suspiciously quiet. Rumors said she was in Europe reassessing priorities. Marcus remained behind bars, awaiting trial on extortion and a dozen other charges the prosecutor happily stacked. Olivia ran interference like a general, filtering the world down to only what mattered. They even managed a small baby moon, just 3 days in Door County. Walking barefoot on beaches, eating cherry pie for breakfast, making love in a bed that creaked like it was happy for them. On the last night, lying on the sand watching the Milky Way, Amara whispered, "I never thought I'd get this. A husband who looks at me like I hung the stars. 2 healthy babies on the way. Peace." Paul threaded their fingers together. "You deserve every bit of it, and I'm spending the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that." They flew home lighter than air. The storm returned on a Tuesday in late August. Amara was 34 weeks pregnant and had just finished a prenatal checkup. Everything perfect. Zoe and Maya measuring big and strong when her phone rang with an unknown number. She almost ignored it. Then she saw the country code, +254, Kenya. Curiosity won. "Hello?" A woman's voice, soft with a coastal Swahili accent. "Miss Amara Johnson Caldwell." "Yes." "This is Dr. Amina Hassan from Kilifi District Hospital. 3 years ago, you volunteered with us for 6 weeks. Do you remember a patient named Fatuma Juma?" Amara's heart stuttered. Of course. She was 14. Severe malaria. Almost didn't make it. Why? There was a pause long enough to feel like drowning. "Fatuma gave birth last year, Doctor," Hassan said gently. "A little boy. She named him Elias, after the American doctor who paid for her treatment and sat with her every night when she was critical. She asked me to find that doctor. We finally did." Amara closed her eyes. The beach in Kenya. One reckless, beautiful night with a man who had whispered, "I wish I could stay." A man whose real name she hadn't known until months ago. Paul was Elias. And now there was a son. She managed to thank the doctor, ask for photos, promise to call back. Then she sat on the exam table and cried, not from fear, but from the sheer, overwhelming size of the universe rearranging itself around them again. Paul found her there 20 minutes later, tears still falling silently. "Talk to me," he said, panic rising. She handed him the phone with the photos already open. A little boy with Paul's eyes and wide, curious smile stared back. Paul sank into the chair beside her, face pale. "I paid for her care, anonymously," he whispered. "I sat with her because she reminded me of my little sister before we lost her. I never," his voice cracked. "There's a child, my child, our child," Amara corrected softly. "We're a package deal now, remember?" He looked at her, eyes shattered and shining. "How are you not angry?" "Because 3 years ago, I fell a little bit in love with a doctor who held a dying girl's hand and cried when she opened her eyes. I just didn't know that doctor would one day be my husband." She cupped his face. "We'll bring him home. Paul, all of them, Zoe, Maya, and little Elias. We have room. We have love. That's enough." Paul pulled her into his arms and held on like she was the only solid thing in a spinning world. That night they lay awake making plans, lawyers, visas, a bigger house with a yard. How to explain to a 2-year-old across an ocean that he suddenly had a daddy, a mommy, and 2 baby sisters on the way. They fell asleep whispering Swahili lullabies neither of them had spoken in years. Peace lasted exactly 9 more days. September arrived humid and restless. Amara was 36 weeks pregnant, waddling more than walking, radiant and exhausted in equal measure. Paul had officially stepped back from Caldwell Enterprises, handing day-to-day control to a trusted president because he refused to miss a single appointment, a single kick, a single moment. On a Thursday that started perfectly ordinary, everything ended. They were at the community center now, officially the Grace Johnson Family Center, newly renovated with a library, a teaching kitchen, and a mural of Amara's mother painted by the kids. Paul was on the floor, attempting to assemble a donated swing set, while Jamal and 3 other teenagers heckled him good-naturedly. Amara laughed so hard she had to sit down. That was when the first contraction hit sharp, breathtaking, too early. She gasped, hand flying to her belly. Paul was beside her, in a heartbeat. Amara. Another one. Closer. Paul, she whispered, suddenly terrified. It's too soon. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens, and Paul, holding her hand so tight, she felt the bones grind. Monitors shrieked. The obstetrician met them at the door. Face grim. Preterm labor. 36 weeks is viable, but we have to move fast. They wheeled her straight into the OR for an emergency C-section. Paul changed into scrubs with shaking hands, kissed her forehead as they put the spinal block in place. I'm right here, he kept saying. I've got you. We've got this. Zoe Grace Caldwell was born first at 7:46 p.m., 4 pounds 11 ounces, crying like she was furious at the world for rushing her. Maya Joy Caldwell followed 2 minutes later, 4 pounds 9 ounces, quieter but stubborn, pink and perfect. Paul wept openly when they placed the babies on Amara's chest, tiny, fierce theirs. They were moved to the NICU for monitoring, but the doctors were optimistic. Lungs are strong. They just need a little time to grow. Paul refused to leave. He slept in the recliner beside the incubators, woke every time a monitor beeped, learned to change diapers the size of postage stamps. Victoria arrived the next morning with flowers and tears, fully surrendered. They're beautiful, she whispered, touching Zoe's tiny hand through the porthole. I was wrong about everything. Let me help. Amara, still pale and sore, managed a tired smile. You can start by holding your nieces when they're big enough. For 48 hours, the world was soft again. Then Marcus escaped. No one knew how bribery. Inside help. Sheer desperation. But at 3:12 a.m. on Sunday, he walked out of the county jail's transport van during a transfer and vanished. By dawn, every cop in Illinois was looking for him. Paul moved his family, Amara still recovering, babies still in NICU, into a secure wing of the hospital guarded like Fort Knox. He didn't sleep. He barely ate. On the 4th night, Amara woke to find him standing at the window, staring into the dark. Come to bed, she murmured. He's coming, Paul said quietly. I can feel it. He was right. At 2:07 a.m., the fire alarms went off on the maternity floor. Security scrambled. Paul kissed Amara hard, told her he loved her, and went to find the threat himself because if Marcus wanted his family, he would have to go through him first. He found Marcus in the NICU corridor, soaked in gasoline, lighter in one hand, a stolen security badge in the other. The babies were behind the glass, 10 feet away. Marcus's eyes were wild. "You took everything from me." "I took nothing," Paul said, voice calm despite the roaring in his ears. "You threw it away." Marcus flicked the lighter. Flame danced. Paul didn't flinch. "You'll burn before you touch them." Behind Marcus, 2 SWAT officers appeared silently, rifles raised. "Drop it," one ordered. Marcus laughed a broken, desperate sound, and for one terrifying second, Paul thought he would do it, would light the gasoline and take them all. Instead, Marcus looked past Paul to the nursery window, where Amara stood in her hospital gown, arms wrapped around herself, tears streaming. Marcus's face crumpled. The lighter fell from his fingers, unlit. Officers tackled him. It was over in seconds. Paul didn't move until they had him cuffed and dragged away, screaming. Only then did he turn and ran back to Amara. She met him halfway, and they held each other in the empty corridor, while nurses cried and security radios crackled and the babies slept on, safe. Later, when the sun came up and the city woke to headlines screaming "Manhunt ends in hospital, showdown," Paul and Amara stood together at the nursery window, watching Zoe and Maya stretch tiny fists toward each other. "He almost took this from us," Amara whispered. Paul slipped his arm around her waist. "He almost took you from me once, in a burning car. The universe keeps giving you back to me. I'm not letting go again." Amara leaned her head against his shoulder. Behind the glass, Maya opened her eyes, Paul's eyes, and seemed to look straight at them. Amara smiled through tears. Looks like she agrees. The nightmare was finally, truly over, and the real life, the loud, messy, perfect one, was just beginning. October painted Chicago in gold and crimson. After 41 days in the NICU, Zoe and Maya were cleared to come home. The doctors called them feisty miracles. Paul called them the bosses, because the moment the nurses tried to change the feeding schedule, both girls screamed until the entire floor surrendered. Discharge day felt like a coronation. Paul pushed one stroller, Amara the other. Olivia carried the mountain of bags. Jamal and 3 other teenagers from the center walked alongside like a royal guard, holding balloons that read, "Welcome home, princesses." Victoria, now fully redeemed and dangerously soft, around the babies, followed with a diaper cake the size of a wedding tear. They stepped out of the hospital into a perfect autumn afternoon. A small crowd of reporters waited behind barricades, but for once, they kept a respectful distance. Someone started clapping, then someone else. By the time the family reached the waiting SUV, the entire sidewalk was applauding. Amara looked at Paul, eyes shining. Did we just get a standing ovation for bringing our kids home? "Get used to it," he grinned. "We're kind of a big deal." The new house sat on 3 quiet acres just north of the city old oak trees. Wraparound porch, a swing big enough for an entire family. The nursery had grown into a wonderland of soft blues and yellows, books, and a rocking chair that had belonged to Amara's mother. The first night was chaos and magic. Zoe decided 200 was party time. Maya decided she hated the swaddle. Paul walked the hallway singing off-key Bruce Springsteen while Amara nursed on the couch, both of them too exhausted to laugh and laughing anyway. At 4:17 a.m., both babies finally asleep in the same crib, arms flung toward each other. Paul and Amara stood over them in the dim glow of the nightlight. "We did it," Amara whispered. "We actually brought them home." Paul wrapped his arms around her from behind, chin resting on her head. "We're a family." Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall soft, silent, covering the world in forgiveness. The next months blurred into a rhythm of bottles, lullabies, and love so fierce it felt like armor. Victoria moved into the guest house and became the most overprotective aunt in history. Jamal started college on a full scholarship funded quietly by Paul and loudly celebrated by everyone else. The Grace Johnson Family Center expanded into a second location. And in Kenya, little Elias's paperwork moved through the system faster than anyone thought possible. By the time Zoe and Maya were 4 months old, their big brother was on a plane with Dr. Tamina, clutching a stuffed giraffe and a photo of the family waiting for him. The reunion happened in the middle of the living room on a random Tuesday in March. Elias stepped through the door, wide-eyed, clutching Dr. Amina's hand. He saw Paul first, those same eyes staring back at him, and froze. Paul knelt slowly. "Jambo, Elias, huh?" The little boy's face broke open like sunrise. He ran. Paul caught him, lifted him high, and held on as Elias buried his face in his father's neck and cried. Amara knelt too, tears streaming, and Elias reached for her with one arm while still clinging to Paul with the other. Zoe and Maya watched from their playmat, fascinated by the new loud person who smelled like cinnamon and airplane. That night, 3 children slept under one roof, for the first time Elias in his brand new big boy bed, painted like a Kenyan sunset. The twins in their cribs, tiny fists curled around the same blanket. Paul and Amara stood in the hallway outside the doors, listening to the quiet breathing of their impossible family. "I keep thinking it can't get better," Amara whispered. Paul kissed her temple. "Give it time." 5 years later, the Grace Johnson Academy opened its doors on a bright September morning. What had started as a dream whispered over NICU incubators was now a full pre-K through 8th grade school on the south side, sun-filled classrooms, rooftop garden, music room with real instruments, and a library named after Amara's mother. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew the mayor, 3 news vans, and every kid who had ever passed through the original community center. Amara stood at the podium in a simple yellow dress, hair twisted up with a pencil, radiant as ever. Paul stood behind her with one arm around 7-year-old Elias, who was trying very hard to look serious in his tiny suit. Zoe and Maya, now 5, identical except for the fact that Zoe's hair was always in perfect braids, and Maya's was a glorious explosion of curls, flanked their Aunt Victoria, who had officially become the Academy's biggest donor and biggest softie. Jamal, now 22 and finishing his engineering degree, held the giant scissors. Amara's voice carried over the crowd, steady and warm. "My mother used to say that family isn't just who you're born to, it's who shows up when the world is on fire and refuses to leave. This school is proof that love, chosen every single day, can build something stronger than brick and steel." She looked at Paul, then, eyes shining. Some of us found that love in the middle of a rainstorm, in a burning car, across an ocean, or in the quiet beeping of hospital monitors. We found it, and we kept choosing it. The crowd erupted as the ribbon fell. Later, in the new playground, Paul pushed Maya on the swing while Zoe and Elias argued over who got the slide next. Amara sat on a bench watching, coffee in hand, when Victoria dropped down beside her. "You were right," Victoria said quietly. "I fought the wrong war. This is what legacy actually looks like." Amara bumped her shoulder. "You helped build it. You know, those science labs didn't fund themselves." Victoria smiled, the real kind she'd only learned in the last 5 years. "I'm still making up for being an idiot. Keep buying ice cream for the kids, and we'll call it even." That night, after the kids were finally asleep, Elias reading chapter books to his little sisters, whether they understood or not. Paul and Amara slipped out to the back porch. The sky was clear, stars bright enough to compete with the city glow. Paul pulled her into his lap on the old swing. "Remember when we thought surviving the night was the hard part?" he asked. Amara laughed softly. "Now the hard part is getting 3 kids to brush their teeth without a United Nations summit." He kissed the side of her neck. "I'd take 1,000 toothbrushing wars for this life." She turned to face him, moonlight painting silver across her cheekbones. "We made it," she whispered, "all the way through fire and fear and impossible odds. We made it." Paul rested his forehead against hers. "And tomorrow, we get to do it all again. Bigger, louder, messier, better." In the quiet, they could hear Elias's muffled voice through the open window, reading Goodnight Moon to the girls, for the 3rd time, because Maya insisted the moon needed one more good night. Amara smiled against Paul's lips. "That's our legacy." He kissed her, then slow, reverent, the kind of kiss that still felt like the first time and the last time all at once. Above them, the stars kept watch. Below them, 3 small hearts beat strong and safe. And somewhere across the city, the place where a Bentley once burned on a rain-soaked bridge now had a simple plaque installed by the highway department. On this spot, a stranger became a hero. Love began in fire and grew into forever. Thank you for coming on this wild, heart-melting journey with Paul, Amara, Elias, Zoe, and Maya. If this story made you laugh, cry, cheer, or believe in second and third chances at love, do me a favor, drop a comment below and tell me your favorite moment. Hit that like button so more people can find this crazy, beautiful ride. And subscribe with notifications on so you never miss the next love story that proves destiny, sometimes wears soaking wet sneakers and isn't afraid to run into flames. See you in the next one.